Добрый, добрый, добрый. Okay. Should we start? All right. Good day, morning, night, whatever it is in wherever you are, and welcome to the next panel of our conference, Trade and Empire, Productivity, Economic Exchange, and Difference in Eurasia. I just wanted to remind everyone that the panel is also live streamed on Imperio channel via YouTube. And so we should keep that in mind, that we are public. The panel today is called Routes, Spaces, and Commerce. And there are two presenters, so it's a shorter panel, which should give me a chance to allocate more time to the discussant and for the discussion in general. Our first presenter today is Mikhail Agapov, who is a research fellow at the Siberian branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and is the author of many studies of the late 19th century ideas of travel, space, and sort of economic imagination, apart from the fact that he also wrote a study of the Soviet policies towards the Palestinian question. And the title of Mikhail's presentation is Proper Trade Relations, Public Debate over Routes and Tariffs of Siberian Export in the Last Quarter of the 19th, the beginning of the 20th century. And I also wanted to add that Mikhail published an article in 2019 in Imperio, which is called The Plot Against the North of Russia, Nationalization of the Entrepreneurial Discourse in the 1860s. The article is in Russian, and you can download it and read it to get acquainted with his work. So, Mikhail, the floor is yours. Please.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay. Let me share my screen. I'm sorry. How can I do it? Okay. So, first of all, I must apologize for the English. So I'll try to do my best. Well, just get started. There were two very important discussions in 1875, geographical and archival. Let's start with the first one. In 1875, Niels Adolf Erik Nordenskiöld, the Swedish navigator and scientist, made a successful voyage from Tromsø to the estuary on the Prevent ship. In 1876, he recreated the route on the steam vessel Ymer. Finally, in 1878, 1879, Nordenskiöld became the first who had made a voyage through the Arctic Ocean Eurasian coast on the steam vessel Vega. The Russian public had a mixed feeling toward Nordenskiöld. On the one hand, the navigator and scientist was warmly welcomed in Russia. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs moved for rewarding Nordenskiöld on the ground that the work of the Yenisei expedition of 1875, I quote, are concerned mostly with Russia and may be significant for our commerce and industry. End of quote. Russian merchants such as Sidorov, Siberikov, focused on the export of the Siberian products, were especially optimistic about the Arctic Ocean commercial navigation. Later, they made a significant contribution to the financing of Imer and Vega voyages. At the same time, even the most passionate admirers of Northern Shelf regarded that such an important geographical discovery for Russia was made not by a Russian, but by a foreign person. The second discovery was made in a cave, and it was directly connected with the first one. In 1875, the letters of Tsar Mikhail Fedorovich and Tobolsk voivode, war governor of province, Knyaz Ivan Semyonovich Kurakin, dated 1616-1618, were published for the first time. The documents witnessed that since ancient times in the Russian north, there was a so-called Mangazeyski sea passage from Pomoria to the Gulf of Ob. But at the beginning of 20th of the 17th century, the passage was closed by Knyaz Kurakin initiative. The argument of Tobolsk voivode was that there was a threat of taking this sea route to the northwestern Siberia by foreign merchants. From the moment of the publication, Tsar and Knyaz Kurakin letters had been used as a counter-argument to the benefit of the development of commerce on the Northern Sea route. A thesis saying that Northern Shelf wouldn't have had to open a sea passage from Europe to Siberia if the last one hadn't been closed by Knyaz Kurakin in 17th century became popular. However, Tobolsk voivode got his protectors who claimed that his action answered the interests of the Russian state. A dispute over Mangazeye resulted into a wide public debate on the export of Siberia goods, during which such cliché as the right commerce, the right navigation, the right tariffs, etc. Were used all the time. Moreover, different participants of the debate differently what exactly should be considered as the right, but each and every one of them saw his position as patriotic and other state one. With varying degrees of intensity, the debate went on throughout the last quarter of the 19th, the beginning of the 20th centuries. It's necessary to underline that the debate began during the period of the dominant of international system of free trade, which Russia was a part, unfolded as the protectionist tendency in the economic policy of the Russian Empire in intensified, which secured with the adoption of the customs tariff of 1891, and then continued until the era of the Soviet Sea expedition. Another one of the peculiarity of the analysis debate was its close link to the question of Siberia states. From a particular point of view, it can be said that it was a dispute of Siberia with Russia. Russia and Siberia, a fixed expression of that time. However, even Siberian leaders didn't present a united front. Moreover, supporters of Siberian export were often outnumbered. As envisioned by Sidorov, Trapeznikov, Sibiryakov, and others, the sea passage made by Northern Shelf was supposed to become the Siberian goods export channel. But as the Russian navigators didn't dare to use this passage for a long time, it was occupied by the English, the German, and the Norwegian merchants who use this passage primarily to import their goods to Siberia. Siberian merchants, dreaming about exporting their goods to Europe, counted on the ship back, like reverse export. This explains they desire to draw the foreign merchants into the estuaries of Siberian reefs by means of establishing there the Porta Franca regime. In 1877, the Ministry of Finance sustained motions of the foreign merchants and the Siberian business group on duty-free import of the estuaries of the Ob and the Yenisei in 1877 and 1878 of foreign goods, except for manufactory, tea, strong alcohol, beer, cigars, and sugar. In 1879, 1883, the duty-free import right was annual renewed, and the field of its appliance expanded. A prominent public and military leader, polar explorer, Vice Admiral Stepan Osipovich Makarov, who was a member of the informal group of the Right National Economic System supporters, formed around the Ministry of Finance Sergey Yulievich Witte, also criticized the Porta Franca regime. By supporting the idea of regular navigation by the Northern Sea route and suggesting a program for its development, Makarov simultaneously instated on the Porta Franca regime cancellation on the Ob and the Yenisei, counting on forcing the foreigners out. In the report on exploration of the sea route to the Ob at the sea, conducted in summer of 1897 at the instruction of the Ministry of Finance Witte, Makarov asserted that firstly, the Kara Sea had been explored in the 18th century by the Russian navigators, and the Russian merchants had started to carry on trade by it in 1877, but later were forced out by the Englishmen. Secondly, the foreign merchants were interested only in the import of foreign goods to Siberia. The shipback, like reverse export, wasn't an item of their interest. Thirdly, the Porta Franca regime favored only the import of the expensive foreign goods. It didn't make benefit neither for the Siberian merchants exporters, nor for the Russian government, which bore, I'm quote Makarov, circumstantial sacrifice in the form of customs duties. So Admiral Makarov ignored the Siberian experts' argumentation that the reverse export provided by customs privilege was the only acceptable way for them to sell goods to European markets. From Admiral Makarov's perspective, regional interest should be subject to the interest of the whole state. In the view of the right national economic system supporters, the term Porta Franca was a synonym for the non-profitable economic exchange. Retailing the main thesis of a German economist, Friedrich List, in brochure named Friedrich List and the National Economy, Witte underlined the inadmissibility of our rivers and ports, our shores and our seas being under foreign influence. Makarov report contributed to the cancellation of the Committee of Ministries special provision of 1888 on Porto Franco regime, but the goods were still imported duty-free into the estuaries of Siberian rivers, this time not on the basis of the Common Ministry's special provision, but individually. This causes is confirmed by Alexander Trubin thesis that the Porto Franco in the second half of the 19th century in Russia wasn't unified regime and asset practice, but a complex fragmented phenomenon. At the turn of 20th century, the Siberian regionalism movement leaders, областники, stepped up into the debate. According to them, the most important condition for the development of Siberia was a formation of the strong Siberian bourgeoisie. And this, in its turn, required considerable investments into the regional agriculture and industrial sectors. At the same time, entrepreneurs from the European Russia considered Siberia primarily as a market for their goods, and that was acceptable for the major part of the Siberian merchantry, making its profit in intermediary trade. Markets of the European Russia were in fact closed for the Siberian manufacturers by means of Chelyabinsk tariff barrier of 1896, the flour tariff of 97, etc. As such, the leaders of the Siberian regionalism movement, being skeptic at first towards the perspectives of trade by the Northern Sea route, began to consider the Porto Franco regime as the key to resolving pressing regional problems. They drafted a law about Porto Franco in the estuaries of the Ob and the Yenisei as a measure for the recovery of the north of Siberia and establishing the Northern Sea route, which was introduced to the Third State Duma in 1908. Mikhail Alexandrovich Ostrogradsky, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, recommended the Duma members to reject the law as, to his point of view, it could lead to the separation of Siberia from European Russia. As a counter measure to the legislative initiative of the Siberian Duma members, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry introduced a law about expanding the maritime customs area, which cancelled the Porto Franco regime in the estuaries of the Siberian rivers. The ministry's law was adopted on December 1999. The duty-free import to the estuary of the Yenisei was allowed only on July 1915 and during the wartime only. The final adoption of the Porto Franco regime in the estuaries of the Ob and Yenisei was ratified by the law dated the 22nd of February 1917. So, at the turn of 20th centuries, the imperial government, based on the ideas of Friedrich List, tried to implement the model of right national economic system, but subject of which, as opposite to the cosmopolitan economy, was the nation, but not the humanity. Thus, if the free trade was the main instrument of the cosmopolitan economy, the main instrument of the national economy was the protectionism. More precisely, protectionism, to use Witte phrase. The national economy model embodiment demanded from the Russian government an according resolution of the question on interaction between the inner market, the space of economic exchange, and the national state, the territory of political sovereignty. In other words, it was required to realize the economic policy which could structure the national space. At the same time, the inner national space and the imperial center primarily means the native Russia, when the provincial territories, окраины, including Siberia, were reckoned from colonial perspective. As a result, the Russian protectionism at the turn of 20th century gained the characteristic duality. On the one hand, it favored the national economy in the face of the World War, and to the central Russian industry in the face of the province, from the other hand. At first glance, this situation was absolutely inadmissible from the national economy model's point of view, as its prior task was to eliminate the inner customs. However, Friedrich supported the idea of eliminate of trade barriers between German states, possessing equal rights, which took the national unionizing path. In Russia, the situation was different. Firstly, the province of the Russian Empire were not equal to the native Russia, in some cases inferior to her in terms of local rights, and in other superior to her. Secondly, the Russian project of national building didn't take into account the whole empire from the beginning. Thirdly, the widespread phobias in St. Petersburg regarding provincial autonomistic behavior only triggered the formation of new local movements. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mikhail. All right. Our next presenter is Fedor Korandei, who is a senior research fellow at the Laboratory for Historical Geography and Regional Studies at Tyumen State University. And Fedor is interested in social geography, historical geography, comparative global history, travel writing, exploration studies, and he has published quite a bit on the imagination of environment and space in Siberian North. Most recently, he published an article titled Eurasian Environments, Nature and Ecology in Imperial Russian and Soviet History in Imperio. The title of Fedor's presentation is The Hinterland of the Northern Sea Route, Changing Perspectives on the Siberian Sea Export, 1874-1934. Fedor, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
I should show a presentation. Okay. Dear all, I am glad to be here. I would like to Empire because there was a continuation there of Northern Sea Route. As a historian, I'm not studying economic history and focus mainly on special representations, which are considered by me as an outcome of intertangled transport and knowledge infrastructures. In some sense, it's history about how the common special discourses peculiar for some societies or classes are framed by the special. I study study how certain special practices define representations of space as well as spaces of representations and vice versa. Applications seem trivial, but the practices of representing space, special people who build special networks based on special ideas and technical opportunities. Today, considering there's the case of Siberian export in early Soviet years, I would like to discuss the underlying idea of development of the North, which was one of the basic imperatives of the Soviet project. I argue that behind the facade of the development of the North were hidden several different, in terms of place and time of origin, ideas, sometimes coexisted in the same minds and the same texts. The main hero of my today's talk is the Soviet Committee of the Northern Sea Route, Komseverput, and that follows, key institution in the international exchange of goods in the Kara Sea Basin in 1920-1932. During this period, Komseverput had arranged 13 Kara Sea expeditions intended for the escorting of cargo fleet to the mouth of the Ob at the Yenisei, delivering on European imports and the export of Siberian goods. My sources mainly include the business documentation of Komseverput from Novosibirsk and Moscow, declarations of its officers, the in-house publications of the committee, and details of media coverage of its activity. But in this presentation, I would like to focus on related contemporary cartography, which always see how different discourses of development of the North acted as mutually complemented or struggled against each other. On this slide, you can see the main stages of development of a topic of interest. I would like to show the genealogy of the Soviet idea of development of the North as a history of several discourses. The agenda for the export of Siberian goods abroad for quite some time made relevant the very idea of moving to the North. So the question of Siberian export is very important. In its turn, the history of the modern export of Siberian goods abroad by the Northern Sea Route goes back to the middle of the 19th century. Technological models and tools for implementing global connectivity started to be introduced into Russian practice. Here, timeline history of Siberian sea export. This is one of the sayings typical of the era, pointing the emergence of two discourses. The first of regional Siberian merchant elite developed a narrative of identity based on the idea that the Siberian economy has been for a long time isolated from the world and was needed to be open for the international market. And the second reflected the aspirations of imperial business officials and intelligentsia who sought to use the new technological capabilities of the modern era for special mobilization of national or empire level. These discourses, as you can see from Sidorov's case here, we could get along quite well in the same minds, but however, at the same time came into conflict because of the international integration agenda of the former and the imperial competitive agenda of the latter. The idea that the Siberian wealth locked inside the continent supposedly needed to be open for the international market was very attractive for many people. The Northern Sea Route, as a political and poetical aftermath of the modern infrastructure, was designed for its implementation. But as we can see from the history of early period of commercial expeditions via the Northern Sea Route during free trade regime in 1879-1905, in that period, due to the lack of efficient local transport, port infrastructure, as well as small production volumes of valuable goods, in Siberian sea trade prevailed the import. In that early period, Siberian export was more an ideology than a profitable business. In fact, Alpha plans to export wood, graphite, and wheat were articulated throughout the last quarter of the 19th century. De facto pioneer in the export of Siberian raw materials became the Siberian Company of Norwegian Jonas Lied. In 1914, they undertook the test attempt of exporting timber, and in this case it was really peace cargo, thus we know exactly how many logs were exported. But mostly, late Siberian Company exported barter. That's turned out to be very profitable. However, because of the revolution, we don't know how this company would end. In any case, those who were after Lied, such as Komsomolets officials, wrote that he exported not what really promised to become a new market, but only the most profitable products at that time, butter. Siberian export agenda formed the base for the numerous projects related to the planning of new Siberian logistics and transport networks. Комитет Северно-Морского пути, founded by Kolchak government in 1919 as an exploring and arrangement of Northern Sea route, was one such example. Here you see an extract from the constituent document of this committee. An outline of the history of the Komsomolets, which after the fall of the Kolchak government turned into a Soviet organization, was presented in a paper that was brought to your attention earlier. In this presentation, I would like to focus on information graphics and popular cartography, which accompanied the development of the committee's inland empire. In fact, these maps and statistic charts represent a graphic expression of the transformation of pre-revolutionary regional Siberian and technological connectedness discourses into one early Soviet regional production complex discourse. From the next few slides, you will see what was the geographical scale of the originally proposed hinterland of Siberian exports, and secondly, how varied was its range of products. As you can see, since 1922, Komsomolets, patronized by its ministry, People's Commissariat of Trade and Industry, Narkomvneshtorg, was regularly trying to involve in its export network not only Siberia, but also adjacent regions Far East, Kyrgyzia, Turkestan, and Kazakhstan. The most extensive, both in terms of geography and in terms of product offering, the hinterland of the Northern Sea route was in 1924. According to the design of the Kara Sea expedition in 1924, it was formulated as follows. You can see all these areas naturally gravitating towards cargo turnover by the Northern Sea route should be involved in the Kara Sea expedition. With this products range assortment of Siberian exports in the first half of the 20s, articulating its initial idea of the need to export Siberian wealth to the international market. From these statistics, one can see also how this assortment was shrinking as the Komsomolets focused on the development of the regional single industry timber economy on the lower Yenisei. Next come a series of maps depicting the Northern Sea route from the point of view of Komsomolets. This point of view allows you to see how the inner hinterland of the Northern Sea route was imagined. Firstly, it was multi-local, and secondly, it included places that are hardly even now associated with Siberia, for example, Moscow, Murmansk, Chelyabinsk, Orenburg, and so on. And this map was attached to the report of the student of Karl Marx Institute of National Economy, Alexander Notkin, who was a member of river part of the Kara Sea expedition. After 1928, in 1929 and 1930, when the Northern Sea became popular in the USSR, the Komsover put and its voices in media produced many maps depicting the Northern Sea route. As you can see, despite the fact that from the first 5-year plan, the Kara-Sea expedition, Siberian hinterland remains important for the imagination of the Komsover put. This is a 1930 map from the travel report of the Novosibirsk journalist Ilya, who dedicated himself to writing of the Komsover put advances since 1926. Another map. And another map. To sum up, they can compare this cartography above with articulates the point of view of other discussed technological connectedness discussed. The Great Northern Way project was aimed at establishing a space of connectedness within the borders of the USSR. Another map, which published in 1935 in the Soviet Arctica Journal, a popular edition illustrating the efforts of the Northern Sea Route Chief Directorate to develop the North, demonstrates the point of view of the display of force discourse. Firstly, there's virtually no Siberian hinterland here, except for ports located on the coast. And secondly, this map no longer involves international trade. With ports on the coast and the system of northern deliveries serving them, Siberian Zavos, actually made the Northern Sea route as in-country artery. Although, in fact, timber export did not stop even in Stalin period, but its volumes did not grow and remained extremely insignificant. Real growth in forest exports began only 50s during the Khrushchev 7-year plan. This wooden diagram, now held in the Garka Permafrost Museum, shows that real growth of timber export began practically only from the beginning of the 60s, reaching its peak by 1978. In fact, this growth, which is associated with the history of Igarka, the Soviet timber industry capital on the Yenisei, and Yenisei was the result of the return to the discourse of the industrial complexes, first formulated in the beginning of the 30s. Post-Soviet destruction of the lower Yenisei industrial complex led to the decline of its company town. Last few years, author of this paper was a member of team project aimed to explore the practical spatial connectedness of the Russian Arctic coast, as well as common representations and discourses reflecting this connectedness. As this project revealed, the Northern Sea route, contemporary Northern Sea route, which has been developing since last quarter of the 19th century as a way to open its closed Siberian hinterland for a European market, nowadays lost all practical, economical, as well as discursive associations, both with all Siberian bases of the development of the North, Omsk, Novosibirsk, and Krasnoyarsk, and with the Soviet ports in the mouth of the Siberian rivers, which had been developed by the Komsover put and Chief Directorate of the Northern Sea Road during the era of Kara-Sea expeditions, such as Dixon, Novi Port, Igarka, Tixi. Having lost their basic maritime functions, such places as Dixon and Igarka now fell into decay. The common government-sponsored media discourse representing the contemporary corporate-based Northern Sea route, whose real economic function almost exclusively is the export of mineral raw materials from Yamal and Timur, goes back more to the discourses of the technological connectedness as well as display of force discourse, and does not imply a demonstration of connections with continental hinterland. I'm not so fluent as I could be, but I'll try not to lose any words and answer on your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Fedor. Let me just, okay, very good. Thank you very much. I'm now going to give the floor to the discussant, Ilya Gerasimov, who is executive editor of Imperio, and who was extensively introduced in the first session. So I don't need to do that again. Ilya, please. And you have a little bit more time because we only have two presenters.
So I'll need less time, right? Than last time. Thank you for the extremely interesting papers. This panel is titled Roots, Spaces, and Commerce, but the two papers by Mikhail Agapov and Fedor Korandei are directly, they're centered on the fundamental problem of economic sphere as a specific language. And although they tackle discourses, I would like to stress that it's misleading to think that discourses are already interpretations and that it's sufficient just to read, decipher discourse and to get some inherent meaning in it. Both economic practices and economic discourses communicate specific worldviews, systems of values, visions of groupness, and collective identities, political priorities. If there ever be a new economic history in our field, it will be based on this approach to the sphere of economy. Reading economy as a manifestation of something, of some not strictly speaking economic content. And in this sense, these papers are very instructive and important. Agapov draws an intellectual map of various opinions regarding Siberian trade, granting Siberia duty-free regime of Porto Franco, and coordinating these policies with various political priorities. He places these debates in the context of nationalizing Russian Empire. They are not just out there. This is a specific historical political moment when Russian elites attempted to solve the task of forging the national economy of the would-be Russian nation state. And the available practical measures available to them at the time, in fact, didn't differ much from those that were available in the early 17th century, 250 years before the events. And so it's so appropriately that they were rediscovered exactly at the time of the debates, this early 17th century political intrigue to close Siberia to the foreigners. So the practical measures were the same. What we had to do? Just stop foreigners, the traders getting into the land. But it was needed to forge a new conceptual language, interpreting these measures in a new key. And Agapov duly localizes competing discourses with various interest groups, as both expressing views of these groups and constituting these groupings themselves. So local Siberian elites, central government, Russian nationalists in European Russia, Siberian and European traders, these are collective subjects that produce, sustain, partake in discourses. As he clearly indicates, the important question is not who was right, but what does this polemic tells us about the late imperial society? And Agapov discovers that even in the nationalist discourse, first, the imperial borderlands were not seen as equal and identical to the core Russia. Second, that the project of nationalizing empire didn't aspire to convert the entire country into the Russian nation state, and actually was leaving colonies aside, variously defined. And third, that the government's fear of autonomism only cultivated local particularism. So economy is about redistribution of resources. And it serves as practically and particularly expressive language in the imperial situation of multidimensional diversity. To achieve political or cultural equality, financial resources should be distributed disproportionately, right? And whereas economically uniform space regulated by the invisible hand of market inevitably reproduces cultural and political inequality. And Mikhail is very explicitly elaborates on this dilemma. Somewhat idealizing, we can say that the old imperial constitution, say under Catherine II, was taking this situation for granted, and at least attempted to accommodate the fundamental diversity by the policies based on peculiarly understood checks and balances, or at least quid pro quo. But this social imaginary was radically alien to nation-centered social imaginary nationalists that saw the society as two-dimensional. It's either the Russians with identical interests or subversive separatists. So it's either interest of the nation or parasitic egoism, nothing in between. And this is the map, and very informative map, that Mikhail Agapov presents in his paper. Fedor Korandei's paper identifies 4 discourses regarding the Northern Sea route as indicative of more general views of Siberia, of the North, and this region's place in Russia and in the world. He analyzes the degree to which these discourses complemented or contradicted each other, and how feasible were the visions and projects advanced by them. And paradoxically, it seems that pure discourses with clearly formulated ideological and political implications by themselves are less informative than reading practical economic measures as a peculiar language of self-description and self-representation. Anything can be planned, put on paper, and circulated. What matters is what is put in practice, into practice. So the Rotterdam or Suez canals, to which many projects discussed by Korandei referred, had been actually built despite all the formidable obstacles. Siberian canals were not, but other things were. For example, the Gulag, which is literally a negative connection, or is in Agapov's terms, a reverse export of human resources to Siberia, and oil and later gas pipelines. This shows in Hegelian terms what is real is rational. So what they built was actually what they wanted to build, what they found resources for, what they invested into, besides pipe dreaming, building pipelines, actually. And these practices speak volumes of the vision of Siberia's role vis-a-vis the European Russia and the world. We can discuss how these projects, using this taxonomy produced by Fedor, we can identify these projects with his 4 discourses: the technological connectedness, discuss them in terms of the regional production complex, and the international display of force, particularly the soft force of pipelines. So we can identify them in terms of the same discourses. To make any discourses meaningful and informative, the key question asked by Roland Barthes should be addressed: who is speaking thus? We need to superimpose the map of subjects of discourse outlined by Agapov on the list of discourses identified by Korandei as a cipher code to make them really suggestive. Then we'll see how small Siberian merchants, big-time Siberian traders, European entrepreneurs, government officials use different or the same discourses to communicate different agendas. Then we'll see how local businessmen can strive to achieve the same goal, integrating into the global world, either directly by trading with foreign countries via the route, or by joining forces with foreign partners, say as Siberian cooperators did, or via the proxy of Russian homogenized nation state, delegating all their resources and subjectivity to Moscow government and what it knows the best. The Northern Sea route serves as an idiom of this drive to integrate along all of these different strategies, reserving different statuses to the Siberians vis-a-vis the European and the world. And the third aspect of this work, working with discourses, implies their historicization. Are they coexist in time as Fedor suggests, or supersede each other? That is, do they represent alternative approaches or different stages of the evolving discourse? Again, without historical contextualization, this question cannot be addressed. People can think of anything at a given time. What matters is whether an idea is shared by 5 individuals with access to publication or 5 million of them. Is it a hegemonic discourse or a minority view? So these 3 approaches make discourse analysis into historical analysis per se. First, reading discourses against practices. Second, identifying the authors or at least proponents of certain discourses. And third, their historical situations and measuring the discourses' relative popularity across time. And this is how I perceive the importance of these 2 papers' contribution to the more general discussion of this conference. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Ilya. I have one request for a question, but please use the chat. Okay, I have a second request for a question. Please use the chat to communicate your request to me. The first question is from Igor Stas, and Igor will ask the question in Russian, and I'll do my best to translate. Igor, please.
Всем здравствуйте. У меня 2 вопроса Федору. Большое спасибо за доклады, Мише и Федору. Супер тема, моя любимая тема, моя родная Сибирь. Вот, но у меня 2 вопроса. И оба связаны с циркуляцией дискурсов, вот последних 2, связанных с региональным производственным комплексом и вот демонстрацией силы. Вот по поводу первого дискурса, как я понимаю, Федор обозначил направление изменения, так скажем, тематики открытия всей Сибири в направлении регионального сектора, в данном случае западно-восточного регионального сектора, в первую очередь Енисейска, ну и частично Убертышского бассейна, связанного с деятельностью Ком-Север-Путь. Вот. И, как мне кажется, это, та интерпретация Федора вот в рамках регионального производственного комплекса, она может существовать, и здесь, мне кажется, здесь прослеживается какая-то теоретизация в рамках нового регионализма, там связанная с работами Хэтна, Содербаума, Маркузена, ну и других, и вроде бы все хорошо, но возникает вопрос. Вроде бы открытие всей Сибири заменяется регионом, но первая пятилетка, как мы знаем на Сибири, она разрабатывалась, во-первых, фактически без планов, как таковых планов не было, Госплан Сибирью толком не занимался. И опять же, Сибирь не рассматривается в общем контексте. Но при этом производственные работы в Сибири идут через, в частности, другие предприятия, да, это акционерное Камчатское общество, Сахалинское акционерное общество, через Союз золота или Цвет Медзолота, который в дальнейшем станет базой Дальстроя, ну и, конечно, Ком-Север-Путь. И получается, что существует не сколько сеть региональных территориальных пространств, сколько ведомственных. И вот здесь бы я... Ну, вот у меня какие-то существуют сомнения концептуальные в том смысле, что не является ли этот дискурс не сколько региональным, территориальным, да, вот, который локализуется в конкретном пространстве, сколько скорее заменяется вот ведомственным. И второй вопрос, он расширяет первый, уже связанный с продолжением развития дискурсивных практик к демонстрации силы. И здесь Федор рассуждает о том, что фактически, грубо говоря, дискурс существует сам по себе, да, важно показать его, важна его презентация. И я здесь абсолютно с этим соглашусь, в принципе, и все это прослеживается в период разработок второй пятилетки, где уже полноценно включена Сибирь, и созданием глав Севморпути в конце 1932 года и включением в марте 1933 года Ком-Север-Путь. И все бы хорошо, если бы не одно «но». А именно в том, что фактически с 1933 по 1936 год глав Севморпути будут переданы абсолютно все фактически управление, во-первых, управление всей территорией которая севернее 62-й параллели и Сибири, и на Северном Урале. Помимо этого, за пределами этой территории будут созданы территориальные управления главсевморпути, а именно в Архангельске, в Тобольске, это Омское территориальное управление, в Иркутске, в Красноярске. И те области, созданные в тот же период времени области, Красноярский край и Омская область огромные, они фактически не управляют этими северными территориями. И в контексте нашей конференции, что самое важное, в частности, помимо моей темы, которую я затрону в своем докладе, связанной с индигенным населением, а именно главсевморпути передается торговля, интегральная кооперация. И с 1935 по 1938 год, если внимательно читать документ главсевморпути, они занимаются очень сильно торговлей. Тематика торговли выходит чуть ли не на первый план, сразу же после транспорта. И вот здесь, мне кажется, противоречие. Там есть рассуждение Славина, будущего известного идеолога Севера. Надо понимать, что Славин же работает, он же начальник планового отдела главсевморпути с 1933 по 1938 год. И эти идеи, в том числе, они разрабатываются с Славиным внутри этого управления. И более того, в 1938 году эти главсевморпути передаются функции только транспортные, вводятся уже отдельные вот эти региональные новые комбинаты, то есть в возвращениях на самом деле вот к этой системе Комсеверпуть. У Федора это прослеживается условно там в 60-е годы, ну а как же Норильский комбинат там с 38-го фактически, ну с конца 30-х годов. И вот эти два противоречия, вот, как мне кажется, здесь возникают. Большое спасибо.
Okay, I'm not sure I can translate all of that. So the first part of the question was about whether the discourse of the force of nature, of the discourse of force that Fedor described, was not so much a regional discourse as it was really a discourse produced by Soviet central institutions, the ведомства, the sort of predecessors of the ministries. The second question, Игорь, если вы сможете в одно предложение сжать второй вопрос, как он будет звучать?
Второй вопрос. Так ли эта демонстрация была силой, если последующее Главное управление Северного морского пути занималось непосредственными делами на местах, индигенным народом и в первую очередь торговлей?
Okay. The second part of the question is to what extent this was a demonstration, this discourse was a demonstration of force, as long as the main administration of the Northern Route took care of trade and engaged with the administration of the native peoples and other local affairs. Okay. The next question I have is from Alexander Turbin. Sasha, please.
Okay. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Nice. So hello everyone. So I have rather a comment for Mike Agapov's paper. I've read the Russian version and I was a little bit like surprised that regionalists appear in your paper, like in the very end in the conclusion sections, and a little bit just slightly before, mostly speaking to 1907, right? I just think that you might find and you mentioned that there were earlier attitudes from regionalists, right? That they were pretty skeptical to the ideas. I think that you might maybe look to the articles at Восточное обозрение, for example, in 1888. In September, they have a very interesting article, which also like, and it goes as you say, they are very skeptical on this sea route, but at the same time, it is very they have several good ideas. They speak on all those issues. They speak about what is national interest, like what should the state think about national interest, like is it about industries, trade, or people? They also like speak on the specificity of the region itself, like you know, that you know, it is not a central Russia, that you can't behave here in economically the same way. And they also speak, for example, about politics, about separatism. So I just think that it might, you know, make this story a little bit more enriched with particular comments. Because what I liked a lot in your paper, it is probably the first one about the Siberian Portofranco, which I've read, which was much more personalized in comparison to previous papers I've ever read, because they mostly speak about the legislation, and your story then was like very interesting in this regard. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sasha. The next question is from Marina Magilner. Please, Marina.
Well, thank you. And I'm not sure this is a question. This is more like thinking loudly about these two absolutely fascinating papers for me, in particular, because I'm not an economic historian. And I tremendously enjoyed reading these papers. And so they are very different from the previous papers in this conference, because most of the previous papers dealt with practices and the kind of language of practices that did not necessarily generate any sustained discourses. Like in the case of Shein, you know, the money, there are different monies, but there are no one hegemonic discourse that would tell you that, you know, those money are more preferable because of this and that. And in the case of Sergey, for example, definitely there is this kind of racialized policy and practices, but not necessarily, don't necessarily see a discourse on race and so on and so forth. And the same goes true about opium trade and almost everything, including even, you know, the sugar trade, which kind of Chuck presented as being discussed in political domain, and yet there is no like clearly elaborated discourse that would be so devoid from practices on the ground as we see in Mike's presentation and Fedor's presentation. And everything in your cases, including the politics of comparison, which is absolutely fascinating, and especially in Mike Agapov's presentation, those, you know, references to colonialism, self-colonizing, internal comparison, the names, the pen names like Belomorets and Chernomorets, and the politics of comparison embedded in, you know, these choices. This is all really fascinating, and I keep thinking whether, as Ilya said, we are dealing here with kind of new economic history, or this is really not about economy anymore. And Fedor's paper is, I think, the case in point when, you know, the reality of Gulag, the reality of the absence of labor force, for example, is completely ignored. So it's really, we see economics becoming a language of discussing nationality, of discussing, you know, technological advantages, of discussing something else, because now economics is, you know, this legitimate and dominant and very modern language to think about social issues and political and cultural issues. So basically my question or comment is, how do you understand this fundamental relationships between the discourse that you analyze and, you know, practices on the ground and local interests and basically what we describe as economic rationality? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Marina. The next question I have is from Chain Shu. Please, Chain.
Thank you both for your very excellent papers. I really enjoyed them both. So my first question is for Fyodor, and it just relates to the way that the Siberian regionalists, the oblastniki, were talking a great deal about isolation. But when they talk about isolation, they're really thinking of Siberia or their isolation from the Russian core and from the European West or Europe. They're not really thinking about their isolation from the Russian Far East, for instance. And so when they think about isolation, they're really looking westward, not eastward. So that's my impression. And then looking at the period of Soviet policy, which was, it seems to me, devoted to leveling the uneven development within that region. And you show this very striking chart of decreasing export in the 1920s, which I guess makes me wonder if what the Soviets are doing in a period of the 90s is in fact focusing more on internal economic development. And this relates to something you say about Friedrich List's idea of national economy, and that the basis for it is really a situation where the German states are fairly equal in their level of economic development. And so in some ways, it doesn't really quite apply to Russia in the same way, because the Russian Empire's regions are quite different economically in their level of development. So in a sense, by decreasing export, I wonder if that final piece of your paper, what you call the force display of force discourse, is really about focusing resources for internal development in a way to create a situation where all the regions within the control of the Russian Republic in the USSR will reach the state of development very similar to the German states in the 1830s, which was the basis, which formed the model in a way of Friedrich List's idea of national economy. So I guess that's my question for Fyodor. And my question for Mikhail is, I guess, is on the word that keeps coming up in your paper, and that's the you translate into English as the right trade, the right commerce, the right national economy, pravilная национальная экономика, правильная торговля, and so on. So I wonder, what is the best way for thinking about this word, правильный? This word comes up a lot in different situations. And in Willard Sunderland's book on colonization, Russian colonization, he translated into English as correct. Правильная колонизация becomes correct colonization. And it's contrasted with the idea of стихийная colonization. So what is правильной is different from стихийной. And what it suggests is an idea of orderliness, systematic, something systematic, something orderly. And in a sense, so I wonder if it's possible to think of правильной as rational, as a way of thinking about it. And suggests that in a way, if you think of everyone talking about what is the правильная торговля, it is a way of thinking about what is the right kind, what is economic rationality. So, you know, what is the rational way to deal with commerce? And what's interesting is that you show that both the Russian center, the Imperial center, and Siberia have different ideas about what is correct, what is right, what is rational, which suggests that the idea of economic rationality is actually highly subjective. And this is also, I bring this up because in the Russian version of your paper, you refer to Pierre Rosavallon and his book, Utopian Capitalism. And you refer to him. And I would say that he argues in this book that market and economic activities are in fact infused with politics. And to believe that it could be otherwise is in fact utopian. And hence the title of his book, Utopian Capitalism. to think that markets and economics can operate outside of politics is in fact an ideology. So economic rationality is an ideology kind of deployed in this case by each side of the argument. So I wonder if, you could think about Ravindra, Targovlia and all that in the relationship of how people in this period think about what is rational, what is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Jane. The next question I have is from Benjamin Berlin. Please, Benjamin.
Thank you very much. I also very much enjoyed reading both papers. I've got a whole number of questions. I will limit myself to 3 to 4. To Mikhail Agapov, I was wondering, you cited Ostrogatsky's argument that the law of the Siberian group in the Duma was in fact or separatist or favoring separatist tendencies. So I was wondering, from what you can see, was there any basis to this claim, or was this just an argument or a fear? Were there any tendencies related with from the inner Siberian group discussions in this direction, or was this just polemics? The second little question is, I was wondering if you can say something, if Witte, when he referred to Liszt in his countering the idea of Portofranco, if he was interpreting Liszt right, in the sense that, well, of course, in Germany at least, Liszt has become famous for an advocate for getting rid of trade barriers. So I was just wondering if the idea of getting out foreigners was really part of Liszt's main thinking. That's not what I've come across so far, but I'm not a specialist in Liszt, I have to admit also. A question to both of you, Mikhail, Fedor. I was wondering in both account of debates and discourses, it's totally, from what I could see, inner Russian, right? So I was wondering if there were any foreign actors trying at some moment to get into this debate and arguing for something they would be quite well, which might be of interest or importance to them. The last little question, really, if time is at the end, I was struck by the statistics of timber export. Fedor, if you could say something about the reasons why after 1978 it just brushes down, but that's of course also already outside of the main part. Thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you, Benjamin. And the last question that I have is from Andrei Schlachter. Andrei, we can't hear you. I don't know what's going on, but I think there is no sound. Nope. Yep, I think now there is. Oh, no, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is for Fedor. I know very little about the region or about the Kara Sea expedition, but in researching the Soviet struggle with smuggling in the 1920s, I come across multiple references to the use of the Kara Sea expedition as a kind of loophole, as a source for contraband imports. And these contraband imports, and the sources speak of hundreds of thousands and perhaps millions of rubles worth, never entered the Kara Sea, but were simply the result of wide-scale abuses of two kinds. One was abuse of the Portofranco privileges, and this presumably dates back to the imperial period. And another was the abuse of what was called целевой import, so special imports designed to supply Siberia, that were simply rerouted to much more lucrative markets such as Moscow. And so I simply wonder if such considerations informed any of the discussions that you have uncovered. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Andrei. May I quickly change hats and ask a question of my own, abusing sort of my position at the very last moment? Michael, I have a quick question for you, Mikhail, sorry. The question is, we sort of know and see and identify the tariff policies as a nationalizing measure, right? It sort of lends itself to an interpretation as a particular language of, as Ilya said, of sort of economic imagination. But the laissez-faire, the Porto Franco regime sort of seems to be kind of the idea of let it all go, right? That doesn't seem to be any particular vision of space behind it. What strikes me, though, in this story is that in the story that you tell, it's the Siberian merchants, really, who are interested in Porto Franco, right? It's their kind of claim to the possibility of Siberian export. And they're accused of separatism for that, right? And the other example that we have is, of course, Muravyev-Amursky, right, who introduces Porto Franco in the Far East. And he's also, there are sort of rumors circulating about him planning all sorts of things, separating Eastern Siberia from the Russian Empire. What is, I think, interesting is that in his case, the idea of Porto Franco is closely connected to this notion that this is a kind of a clean slate, right? In this territory, which is to be colonized, we're going to do something entirely new. There are no vestiges of the old imperial sort of structures, like estates, for example. Do you have a sense that Porto Franco is kind of a part of a broader discourse of some sort of regional social engineering? Is there something more behind it than just the idea we're going to export through the seaports and that's it? Or maybe there is a kind of a particular vision of the political and social and national space. That would be my question. So now we'll give the floor to the presenters. We'll go in the same order as we had the papers, starting with Mikhail, please.
Thank you very much for very interesting feedback. But with your permission, I'd prefer answer in Russian, because I'm afraid по-английски я буду очень долго подбирать слова. Еще раз огромное спасибо за чрезвычайно насыщенные, чрезвычайно полезные комментарии. Я постараюсь говорить кратко, чтобы дать возможность и Федору высказаться. Ну, первый момент, что касается соотношений 17 и 19 веков, то, разумеется, я-то прекрасно понимаю, что это совершенно разные исторические ситуации, и участники этих событий это прекрасно понимали, но просто нельзя не обратить внимание на то, как совпало вот эти два открытия, географическое и архивное, и причем вот они именно совпали удивительным образом, что некая такая ущемленное чувство вот именно национального достоинства, что вроде бы Северный морской путь, он наш, а открывает его Норденшельд при всем к нему уважении. Вот, это был такой укол самолюбия. Тут же оказывается, что по большому-то счету, вот если бы не этот князь Куракин, то... И дальше начинается самое интересное. Дальше начинается вот действительно настоящая дискуссия по поводу этой Мангазии 17 века. Это такая вот своего рода, как бы сейчас, наверное, сказали, историческая политика, но не на государственном уровне, а на уровне состязания общественных групп. И любой текст, какой мы не открываем в тот период времени, последняя четверть 19 века по этому периоду, там везде обязательно идет большое пространное введение, вот история Мангазии и та или иная оценка Куракина. Причем, что интересно, что в этой полемике сталкиваются позиции действительно представителей разных групп, и сибирских деятелей, и европейских деятелей, и вот это вот очень такой интересный случай, который, я думаю, может быть, даже заслуживает какого-то отдельного рассмотрения, но здесь я его использовал скорее как такую вводную для текста. Далее, для меня вот ряд проблемных моментов, которые были отмечены, они для меня важны, и я их осознаю. Это, конечно, во-первых, очень большое количество, ну, скажем так, групп интересов, которые участвуют в этой дискуссии, которые так или иначе формулируют свою позицию. И причем, что важно отметить, что очень часто та или иная группа, формулируя какую-то позицию по вопросу, ну вот условно говоря, сибирского экспорта, она на самом деле обеспокоена тем, чтобы сформулировать какой-то аргумент вообще к сибирскому экспорту, имеющий весьма отдаленные отношения. То есть вот здесь вот эта вот проблема сибирской закрытости, она очень сильно инструментализируется и очень сильно используется в самых разных аспектах. Вот буквально вот тот же Черноморец, вот вроде бы какое ему дело до Сибири, он никак с ней не связан, но он высказывается по этому вопросу в связи с другими вопросами. И вот таких вот переплетений очень много. И это пока еще только то, что касается риторических стратегий, то, что касается различных дискурсов. А вот то, что касается такого фундаментального вопроса, как действительно взаимоотношения дискурсов и практик, ну, я пока не готов на этот вопрос ответить развернуто. Но единственное, что я могу сказать, что, конечно, я эту проблему вижу, и ну, я просто стараюсь больше углубляться в какие-то конкретные кейсы, в какие-то конкретные источники, но и действительно мы ни в коем случае не отказываемся и вот этой, от конкретной эмпирики, от конкретного фактологического, статистического материала, не только потому, что этим материалом тоже играет, но очень интересно посмотреть, как этот материал формируется. Вот к тому же, тоже это вот немножко прозвучало, что касается Северного морского пути. А там вообще был вопрос, а существует ли этот Северный морской путь? Я уж не говорю о том, что этот вопрос поразительным образом актуален по сей день. Вот его со времен Норденшельда открывают, там какие-то сквозные мореплавания совершают, и до сих пор вопрос о том, существует ли Северный морской путь, он открыт. И в последней четверти XIX века, чтобы ответить на этот вопрос, а существует ли этот Северный морской путь, тоже каким-то образом операционализировали, пытались операционализировать данные, по которым, опираясь на которые на этот вопрос можно было ответить либо положительно, либо отрицательно. И здесь как раз вот интересно, что в разных системах развлечения по-разному эти методы кодировки формировались. Ну, грубо говоря, кто-то считал количество кораблей, которые прошли, не прошли. Кто-то считал там количество перевезенного груза, сколько там пудов привезли, сколько его затонуло, сколько его стали вывозить, но потом сбросили. И вот из этого тоже формируется какой-то вот этот вот конкретный бэкграунд, какие-то конкретные данные. И это тоже разные оптики, как смотрят на эти цифры. Вот, так, дальше. Что касается, да, и сейчас сразу же к этому моменту скажу. Большое спасибо за Розенвалена. Я вот как раз в этом году его штудировал, и он во многом меня вдохновил. Точно так же, как меня вдохновил и Карл Поланьи, потому что там тоже размышления по поводу дальней и ближней торговли, оно очень хорошо ложится на тот материал, о котором я говорил. То есть, по сути дела, как бы получается, что сибирские рынки вот этими тарифными барьерами их как раз пытались удержать на уровне вот того, что Полоний называет местной торговлей, а они тогда как они сами пытались прорваться на более высокий уровень. Вот это очень интересная система развлечения, и у Полония, у Пьера Розенвалена я просто пока еще не стал их вводить и использовать, потому что, ну, я пока в каком-то смысле в эту проблематику пока еще погружаюсь, и действительно это такая интервенция в сферу экономической истории, и пока что не чувствую себя уверенно, я не рискую здесь как-то серьезно высказываться. В общем, тут еще нужно попрочнее встать. Ну, и то же самое касается Фридриха Листа. И далее, да, вот что касается сепаратизма. Ну, честно говоря, мне кажется, что совершенно очевидно, что это такая стигма, которая во многом навешивалась на областников, и, конечно, достаточно почитать их тексты, чтобы понять, что они-то сепаратистами не были. Более того, они-то как раз размышляли и в категориях мировой торговли, и в категориях имперской торговли. И вот действительно, почему в случае с Дальним Востоком та же самая практика Порто-Франко, в общем-то, насколько мне известно по литературе, не вызывала никаких нареканий в сепаратизме, а здесь, наоборот, вот на сибирском материале мы такое встречаем. Ну, я думаю, что здесь еще нужно разбираться поглубже, но пока что на уровне гипотезы могу сказать, предположить, что тут вот действительно говорилось об одном, подразумевалось другое. И я подозреваю, что все-таки интересы, скажем так, промышленников в Центральной России, они здесь были более важны, и вот сепаратизм, обвинение в сепаратизме, оно, так сказать, вот привешивалось как еще такое клише. Но здесь, конечно, еще нужно поработать, читать внимательно источники. Так, большое спасибо за комментарии. Да, и конечно же, что касается правильной торговли. Вот, это действительно было такое клише, и оно относилось отнюдь не только к сибирскому материалу, обо всем, что с точки зрения данного деятеля считалось ну, действительно рациональным, действительно верным, говорилось, что это правильное. И здесь мне кажется, что вот слово «правильное», как оно использовалось в этих диспутах, ну, это все-таки и какая-то отсылка, ну, знаете, к такой какой-то глубинной правильности. Вот да, с одной стороны, это действительно рационализация, и это действительно какие-то рациональности, причем рациональности разные. А с другой стороны, это вот и отсылка к некой такой, к православию, к правой стороне, как вот не только истинной с рациональной точки зрения, но и морально правильный, если можно так выразиться. Вот, ну, да, это важное замечание. Здесь, конечно, стоит присмотреться к нему повнимательнее. Так, я еще раз прошу прощения, что по-русски. Кажется, я на основные вопросы ответил. И если есть еще какие-то вопросы, я открыт к общению, пожалуйста, пишите.
Спасибо, Михаил. Федор?
I apologize for having cut, since not all questions. Questions.
Федор, если удобнее по-русски, то можно по-русски. Я так понимаю, что у нас в аудитории не осталось людей, которые не говорят или не понимают по-русски, да?
Хорошо. Если удобно по-русски, то мне будет, конечно, гораздо легче. Вопрос, то, что касалось комментариев Ильи про историческую необходимость исторического контекста и необходимость привязывать дискурсы к тем или иным, собственно, историческим деятелям, да, историческим группам и историческим контекстам, я, конечно, с этим полностью согласен, но в данном случае мне было интересно, и я пытался это подчеркнуть, может быть, не очень хорошо, это не очень понятно из этого текста, но нужно учитывать, что я работаю в последнее время вообще с, скажем так, с уровнем просопографии, например, того же Комсевер-Пути, и мне интересны, собственно, эти персоны. И когда мы говорим о них, то мы обнаруживаем, что, во-первых, они ничего не любят говорить. Silent sources, они ничего не говорят про то, что про свои мотивации и про, собственно, то, какие идеи их направляли делать это именно так. И почему мы так поступаем? Вот обнаруживается такая генеалогия знания, то есть генеалогия вот этих слоев дискурса, причем как мы видим и по современным чиновникам, так и по людям 20-х годов, они очень часто пользуются таким бутербродом из разных объясняя, откуда. Это очень интересно, то есть это как бы деловые люди, которые привыкли делать, но не говорить, или вот в советском контексте они ничего не любят говорить, почему они так поступают, но вот когда они проговариваются, это всегда укладывается вот в несколько таких дискурсов, которые я пытался показать. Наверное, интереснее было бы, конечно, показать это через, например, там, не знаю, Шольца, моего любимого персонажа из Комсевер-Пути, его заместителя председателя этого комитета. Вот он был такой как раз. Он очень загадочный в этом смысле и говорит очень много. Это, наверное, относится и к тому, что говорила Марина, то есть как дискурсы и практики соотносятся. Вот они как-то очень странно разводятся, потому что в практике получается одно, в практике мы хотим, ну, как бы мы занимаемся тем, что создаем лесной экспорт в Нижнем Енисее, а в реальности, вернее, наоборот, в своих мечтах и идеях мы хотим, конечно, делать так же, как говорил Востротин, да, в конце XIX века, то есть развивать всю Сибирь и так далее. И это постоянно. Что касается Игоря и его спасибо, очень важных комментариев по поводу того, как разделялся ведомственный уровень и региональный уровень. Но мне, опять же, интересно вот в этом материале то, что это была становящаяся реальность, то есть не было еще ни ведомственного уровня в традиционном советском смысле, не было, собственно, и регионального в том, в котором он осмыслялся. Да? И, ну, вот, в принципе, Славин ранний, он тоже этим интересен. Он говорит очень странные вещи для сталинской эпохи. И то, что он делает в 30-е годы, как мне кажется, очень отличается от того, что он говорил в 1932 году, когда выдвигал вот эти свои планы на вторую пятилетку. То есть, да, это опять же к вопросу о том, что очень трудно понять, ну, как вообще можно описывать их практику. Ведь они, собственно, что-то делали, и практика и идеологическая дискурс здесь всегда очень жестко разводится, вернее, они друг на друга не похожи. И это очень интересно. Да, я плохо знаю эпоху ГОСМП, я ей не занимался, и только сейчас туда немного попадаю. То есть, да, конечно, торговлей. Здесь тоже сюжет, который описал Беренбергер, по-моему, в книжке про Воркуту, где он рассказывал об истории Воркуты, об ее становлении ее угольного комплекса, и, собственно, показывал, что у Воркуты долгое время просто не было публичного измерения. Город существовал, в нем работали люди, но вот именно на уровень дискурсов это не выводилось, на уровень репрезентаций, в том числе географических. И уже только во время войны Воркута, став городом, начала осознавать, или ее власть стали осознавать, что им это нужно, стали создавать какой-то позитивный образ, стали вообще думать о том, что у этой деятельности скрытой и очень мрачной сферы. И это касается вот всей этой практики. Очень долго не занимались тем, что каким-то образом вообще это репрезентировали. Считалось, что это как бы... Ну, то есть практики были, а дискурсов они были отключены. Ну, вот что-то такое. Я прошу прощения за то, что я некоторые вопросы не успел поймать. Чен Сю, вопрос про неравное развитие Сибири в советский период. Здесь я не совсем понял, в чем вопрос, может быть, можно мне пояснить. Да, то есть, возможно, это был комментарий. Также вопрос Бенджамина, кажется, о том, почему, если я правильно понял, о том, почему лесной экспорт пришел в такое состояние уже в 2005 году, да?
Нет, в 78-м.
Это было связано с тем, что... Ну,
Федор, может быть, Чаин пояснит свой вопрос. Чаин, would you repeat the question? Would you be so kind to repeat the question?
Yes, thank you very much. So the question is, I was struck by the way that Soviet policy, in fact, worked to connect the regions by way of enforcing or encouraging similar economic development across that region. And that's contrasted to the way that the Siberian regionalists were thinking about how they were isolated from the world. But when they think about isolation, they're not really thinking about the Russian Far East or other parts of Siberia. They're simply thinking about being cut off from the Russian core. So the Soviet policy, in fact, has an idea of more even regional development outside of the core of Russia, which is interesting because it seems to me that will lead to a situation of regional development that is more like the 1830s in Germany of the 1830s, that the economic development of the 1830s German states, where different German states have more similar kinds of level. And I think this is something that, in fact, Fedor mentioned in his paper, that when Witte applied the model of national economy, he is working with a very different kind of situation. The Russian Empire is not like the German states in the 1830s and 1840s. So in fact, my question is it in fact the Soviets, the Soviet Union, the Soviet policy that is in fact creating a situation that is more like what Liszt was talking about in the 1830s?
Федор, нужен перевод?
Можно, да, пояснить, потому что у меня здесь происходит балаган.
То есть очень вкратце, то есть из вашей работы следует, что именно советская политика обращала внимание на региональное развитие. В этом смысле она гораздо более уравнительная была и гораздо более парадоксально совпадала с идеологией Листа, чем, скажем, то, что делал Витте и все остальные в конце имперского периода. То есть здесь есть некий парадокс, да, что именно советская политика с ее вниманием к регионам вот становится таким более гомогенизирующим фактором.
Да, спасибо. На самом деле здесь была очень долгая история регионального строительства и отношения к регионам, да, и, собственно, тот период, который связан, это вот та ситуация как бы перехода вот к империи Affirmative Action в 30-е годы, когда, собственно, регионы стали приравниваться, в общем-то, к республикам национальным, да, и когда возникла вот эта рамка сталинская. А вот эта вот история со сталинской рамкой affirmative action, она была как бы зажата между двумя эпохами, когда некое региональное внимание к регионам существовало, но, конечно, очень специфическое. Это был такой экономико-географический подход, базирующийся на районном принципе. И, собственно, наибольшего рассвета он успел достичь в 60-е, 70-е годы. Здесь очень интересная история с тем, в общем-то, как советская власть в эпоху хрущевской оттепели впервые, собственно, обратилась к самой России и, например, к Сибири и так далее. Да, это опять же делалось через возвращение к идеям первой пятилетки, которые не успели развиться. Вот что нужно развивать промышленные комплексы на региональном уровне и так далее. Но эта эпоха тоже продолжалась на самом деле не очень долго. Вот, и, собственно, но о ней я сейчас здесь говорить не могу, да, то есть это было позже. 20-е, 30-е это был очень быстрый перебор вариантов того, что возможно сделать.
И вопрос Беньямина о экспорте леса 78 год, пик. С чем это связано?
Но это было связано с тем, что была отстроена система лесоэкспорта, причем очень качественная. И в 1978 году, то есть где-то примерно с начала 70-х годов, там появились новые технологии, собственно, там появился советский лесной флот, который был создан уже специально для этого. И они смогли вывозить очень много. Если до этого, в принципе, всегда лес возили иностранцы, и, собственно, история Игарки, она как раз с этим и связана, что иностранные суда приходят и так далее. То есть Игарка воспринималась как витрина советского строя, в которой, как одно из немногих мест, где возможен был контакт между иностранцами и иностранными моряками и советскими, да. Причем это в Сибири происходило, и советскими людьми. И для сталинского времени, например, это было очень важно. То есть оставить такое место, где можно показать позитивно советский строй. Но примерно с конца 60-х, начала 70-х, например, в тех же газетах Игарки или вообще вот в этом дискурсе, вдруг внезапно иностранцы начинают пропадать. И это было связано с тем, что все было переведено на собственную какую-то авторитическую систему вот этого вывоза. Поэтому вот в 1978 году им удалось, видимо, попасть в рыночный цикл, и они достигли таких результатов. Но все это очень быстро закончилось как раз с упадком Советского Союза.
Окей, очень хорошо. Do we have other questions? All right. Well, then I'll thank all of the presenters and the discussant and all the participants for excellent questions. There is another question that I wanted to get to. This is a question of Андрей Шляхтер. Я его просто прочитаю по-русски. К Федору и к Михаилу. Как влияли злоупотребления, контрабанда на дискуссию о Порто-Франко и Карскую экспедицию? Федор, Михаил, у вас есть какие-то замечания об этом?
Я ничего не знаю о случаях контрабанды, то есть мне это не попадало.
А Михаил?
Так, мне, честно говоря, тоже не попадалось. И знаете, наверное, почему? Потому что, с одной стороны, все-таки, вот если говорить о тех случаях, с которыми я работал, во-первых, с одной стороны, это очень хорошо контролировалось. И изначально, когда давалось разрешение на такую беспошлинную торговлю, то очень четко составлялись списки, какие товары разрешены, какие не разрешены. И, в общем-то, с точки зрения иностранных перевозчиков, ну, мне кажется, там, в общем-то, смысла не было пытаться организовать какую-то сомнительную контрабанду и поставить под риск, рискнуть вот всей этой довольно-таки сложной и торговой, и в навигационном плане операции и так далее. Вот это с одной стороны. А с другой стороны, очень много информации о том, что очень часто даже те товары, которые продавались, которые затем приобретались в Сибири, они не всегда доставлялись обратно, потому что какие-то товары корабли просто не успевали загрузить и уходили, а товары оставались лежать до следующей навигации, часто сгнивали или разграблялись. Какие-то в сложных навигационных условиях уже в Карском море приходилось выбрасывать за борт. И у меня такое ощущение, что вот это вот не тот канал, который удобен для контрабанды. Вот. Но это только такой вот примерный ответ. А дальше нужно внимательно смотреть. Там с чаем, конечно, была совершенно отдельная тема, но это немножко другая история. Хотя по Северному морскому пути чай тоже перевозили, причем его перевозили не иностранцы, а российские предприниматели из европейской части России в Сибирь. Но это совершенно отдельная история. И тоже про контрабанду я там ничего не слышал.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you. So tomorrow we are going to meet for the session that focuses on ports and long distance trade. Thank you all very much, and I'll hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you.